Yeah, I'm a huge sweet tea drinker and have been, like I said, since I was little. My dad always made it, so I grew up with it.
Yeah.
So now you have some and I have some and Ryan has water. Chicken.
Less.
How can you not like sweet tea? It's like an American institution.
My whole dad's side of the family, everyone loves sweet tea, but I'm
Really?
like, I like regular tea, straight
Oh,
up
so it's a rebellion
Yeah.
thing.
tea. No.
Like they all like it, so I'm gonna hate it.
Straight
because-
tea just tastes like dirt to me. It's like I took water and then
Straight tea, right?
dirt.
Well, literally, we crushed up some
Yeah,
leaves and we
that's
put
right.
it in a bag and we ran water over it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
So
And they sell it.
there you go. And
But then I'm also a straight coffee guy, too.
they advertise tea is what it really is.
Yeah.
Crushed leaves in a bag.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
See, I'm a straight coffee guy. You know, I like my
Straight
coffee like I
coffee.
would like my women, strong and black.
You heard it here first.
Good.
Just don't tell me.
Don't tell my wife. Yeah, well, it's on camera now. So, welcome back to Forthright. It's been a while, probably like 6 months, I think it's been since we filmed the last one.
A little over.
Yeah. Things kind of got busy. We started Forthright Currents, and if you're not familiar with that, that is on our same YouTube page, and we've been doing that now. We've got 22 episodes up. It's a weekly sort of a current events thing, but we wanted to make sure we got the roundtable discussion back up and running. We got a lot of good feedback from it, and people really enjoyed it, so we wanted to make sure that we get that going again. So we're going to take a moment to reintroduce ourselves and talk a little bit about what we're doing here, and then get to our first question. So let's start over here with Ryan.
All right. As Tony mentioned, my name is Ryan. I'm a pastor at Risen Savior in Broomfield, Colorado.
And I am Anthony or Tony Creedon. I'm the CEO of Forthright, of the Concordia Association that puts on Forthright.
I'm Drew Ross, pastor at Bethlehem Lutheran, west side of Denver in Lakewood, Colorado.
And we're here to have a roundtable discussion just about the things that you want to hear about. So you guys provide us the questions, and we have an honest and forthright conversation about those things, hopefully to give you an opportunity or a platform to kind of continue that conversation wherever you are, continue that conversation with us by posting. You can post in the comments down below on YouTube, or you can post on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram using the hashtag TV or at ForthrightTV. Let us know your thoughts, or even better, you can ask us another question that we'll cover on a different episode. So what we're going to do format-wise is we're going to cover one question that's provided by you, and then we have a nice little bowl here full of just kind of get-to-know-you questions, so you get a chance to get to know us. So that's kind of how we're going to run things. This will be every couple of weeks we'll put one of these out and just give you a chance to interact. So without further ado then, gentlemen, the first question comes from Barnsey Boy 10. All right, and the question that he's asking is thoughts about couples living together before marriage. All right, so how does Christianity view that? What do we say about that? That's where it's at. So thoughts.
Well, I think the initial challenge is let's not skip ahead of what's obvious. It makes financial sense most of the time.
Right.
It can make sense with even making sure everybody's safe. Some of the times there's some things that where it just starts to make sense. If I'm already spending this much time with this person anyways,
right,
why not move in? Right now we have 2 rents. Right now we have 2 electric bills. Right now we have 2 of this bill, 2 of this bill.
Sure.
If we're going to be together anyways, why not just share the 2? So, I mean, that seems obvious with most people, and it makes sense. If I'm just using rational thinking, it makes sense. I should move in with the person that I'm spending most of my time with. And
I've heard that. Yeah. I mean, most people that I encounter or have a conversation with about it, that's where they go. Yeah. Like just culturally, sociologically, I mean, there's a lot of reasons to say this is a benefit.
Or I just want to help prevent divorce, so why not let's live together so that we trial run so that we know, and then if it doesn't work out, then it's so much easier than going through the pains of divorce.
Right. Although it doesn't work out that way though. I mean, statistically, it doesn't work out that way.
And I think that's the reality is the fascinating thing, and I've done I don't know how many premarital weddings that I've done. The counseling and the services. I think I've done probably over 20.
Okay.
And out of all the 20, 3 of them were not living together.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the stunning thing is, so I've heard all those things. Hey, it's easier. This makes sense.
Sure.
Sometimes they've had a kid together, and so it's kind of like, hey, let's live together. And I'm like, okay, hey, at least you're making that kind of diligence in the family. But the reality is, what's fascinating to me is it should make sense, but it doesn't.
Right.
Because every single study that I've come across in marriage and family life is that living together actually increases your divorce rate.
Yes. Right.
That it increases your risk of safety.
Right.
So, there's evidence that, not saying that if you live together that you're going to be abused, but the abuse actually increases that what they found. And these are non-Christian studies. These are studies that have, paid, scholarly, peer-reviewed studies. And I think this is why the question is, why is it living together and then getting married so risky in that regard?
Yeah, and because there's a mental shift, right? Like if you're living together, there's this sense that like you're sharing something, but like when you're actually married, there's a real like literal mental shift. Yeah. It's now I've made the commitment publicly. I've entered into a different era or time or reality into this relationship, and there's a definite mental switch. And if you can't make that mental transition from, because it's still non-permanent, right? When you're living together, there's still nothing legally binding you to be together. You haven't made a public declaration or statement. There's nothing that keeps you locked into that relationship. And so there's a sense of non-permanence that when you get familiar with that sense of non-permanence and then it becomes a more permanent relationship or reality, then all of a sudden that can do some funny things to the relationship.
I seem to hear people say over and over, because in the same way that Ryan's talking, I feel like most people that I do premarital counseling with, or that I even is led into me doing the wedding service for them, they have been living together. Right. Now, I've never tried to hide the fact that I didn't think that was necessarily the right choice for them. Right. However, I'm going to work with people, of course, because we care about people. However, God has still wired the world to work a certain way.
Correct.
And I find that we in our own human rebellion tend to push against that. I push against that. I like to be rebellious, but yet it still never turns out the way that I desire.
Right.
Again, because God desired even not only the world but relationships to work within a certain way. So most people, when I sit down with them and they're living together, eventually they say something like, well, it's like we're practicing now, and then when we get married, nothing's going to change, and it's going to be easier for our marriage. And then what's happened then later is that I'll also ask people right after the wedding, it's been a few months, 6 months, and I'll say, how are things going? And sometimes early on, what I get two responses. I get the typical response where marriage is challenging right after you get married. Right? I get the typical response, oh, we're having this. And then I also get this response of, but at the same time, nothing has changed from before we got married. Because see, we've already done all of this.
Right.
Yeah. And really, I'm saying your two answers are completely conflictual.
Right. Yeah.
Everything changes once you get married. Right. And a lot of it probably has to do with that. I have now publicly stated my commitment, and it's legally binding.
Yeah, and I think two things, and one thing you touched on, which I think is important, which is, and I have to admit, I was tempted to do this, and when I was doing regular parish ministry, this idea kind of came out, and I was initially sort of all for it. A lot's changed in my life that has made me rethink some of these things, and that is this sort of standing rule that like if we as a congregation are saying that if you live together, we won't even do your wedding, right? And so there's this this sense of like I want to. It's my mind thinks it's very Pharisaical, right? Because it sets a law and it says this is the way it is, and we don't even have to care about you. We'll cast you out of the community because you're living together, and so it's easy, right? It's a cop out. It's like I don't have to get into the muck with you. I don't have to actually get to know you and be invested in people. I can just put up a wall and say, well, if you're living together, we're not even going to do that. Which I just think is wrong-headed. You're not actually reaching people. You're not communicating anything. If your real desire is to have them change the way that they're understanding these things, you have to have the opportunity to speak that change into their life, and that just eliminates that. But the second thing is this idea of sort of the one flesh union and marriage, because here's the other point that I've heard made. Marriage as the institutional reality that we know today is not clearly defined in the Bible. right? In other words, this idea that two people have a contract, right? And we have a contract, and we have this formal service where people stand up and they say these things. That is a more institutional reality to marriage than the way that the Bible depicts marriage, right? So the Bible depicts marriage as this sort of one flesh union, and you have two people who are engaged in either a sexual relationship, right, or a physical or personal relationship, and that's united them. And for us to stand up, in a worship space and say that we publicly declare it, that's more of an institutional reality, and it's not as important as the commitment you make to each other. So we can live together. And that still kind of classifies.
What I've been telling people, and I think it relates to this, is that when people get engaged, and that's when we do speak historically, when people get engaged, the commitment is made then. So let's honor that. Right now, what happens is that people, they get engaged and they say, we're engaged and we're going to get married in 2.5 years. What I'd rather see happen is get engaged, honor that commitment. Forget the institution part, forget the paper part. Make that commitment and honor that commitment. Then get married next week. Get married next month. And sometimes people will have to tell family for sure. Get your family on board. And then the only reason that I think that it tends to take time is because then they need to rent the church, they need to rent the reception hall, they need to do whatever. But if we're going to honor the commitment, let's do without the institution. Let's commit and run.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's what you guys are bringing up is this confluence and conflict within the institution of marriage, and I think it is an institution, but it has baggage. Because as when I say institution, I say this is
said that his marriage has baggage.
I totally picked up on that, and I was like,
please go on. Tell us more.
Yes, I will. My wife doesn't watch. But it's this idea that God institutes it. He creates it. This is one of the first foundational things that God actually creates.
Sure.
The family unit, marriage, and so as an institution in that regard, even before there was even parents, he says, and then this is what's going to happen with the father and mother.
Right.
And so he creates this institution. But I think what we've done as this, how do we navigate those waters culturally through the secular institution of marriage to recognize those things. We've added those baggage of tax breaks to encourage marriage. All these little benefits which are great for those that are married, but it becomes almost encompassing, especially the cultural aspect of marriage. And I think that's especially the wedding day.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the engagement, you're talking about this long engagement, that's what takes place. I have to have that precious wedding day that every single girl dreams of and that desires to have. A whole industry is built on that. I mean, my wife was part of that industry too.
Well, and it was and all that's sort of muddied up by common law.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, common law, at least in Colorado.
Right, well, so tax breaks and things like that. Yeah. Like the incentive now, in terms of marriage, it doesn't even necessitate you going into a space and publicly declaring. In some ways, common law has been you've been together kind of long enough, so we're gonna.
Well, and that's the reality is because things get messy, and really what the court, or at least the in my understanding, what the state typically wants to happen is we want things to be clean and orderly so that the people pay their bills. And that people care for the children.
Sure.
And that's really what the state is really concerned about. And so that's why you have all the divorce proceedings. That's why they have instituted this common law marriage, because you have people that are living together for so long that their finances have kind of become entangled. And so when they become de-entangled, either through death, because that's the other reality, is if they have had a common law marriage or didn't have that protection of common law, then it gets messy, and it can be damaging to the children that were there, or the spouse, or the non-spouse spouse.
Sure.
Let's think about God's intentions for marriage, though, too. Yeah. And sometimes I think that there's, by encouraging people to live together, what we're doing is we're encouraging people to play house. Right. And I never saw throughout Scripture God ever encouraging people to play house. He's just saying, be family.
Right.
Right. And he never desires for that family to ever be broken up.
Sure.
And especially, I know that people are gonna hinge on this word commitment, but a commitment has not been made when I'm simply in relationship with somebody.
Right.
Okay, commitment is made by taking, especially in our own stand. Let's even talk American culture standards.
Sure.
American culture standards, the commitment is taken when there's that moment of marriage.
Yeah.
And so if we desire to play house, we're not committing. And therefore what happens, and I wish it wasn't true, I think probably a lot of people watching wish it wasn't true also, but when we desire to play house, we typically play house with about 4 or 5 or 6 people before we get married.
Right. Right.
And I've never seen that being honored in Scripture. God saying, go play house until you've kicked the tires enough that you've found the person that you can have house with.
Right.
Yeah, and it's this myth of finding the soulmate, your perfect match,
Yeah.
and the reality of that.
Yeah, some of that's there.
And so, there's always this fear, I think, and this. Well, we got to play house till we get the right house. You know, I like your analogy of playing house. It'd almost be like, my wife and I, we bought a house about a year ago, and so it's like, if we wanted to play house with actual houses, would that really work?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, can we live here for a year and see?
I kind of wish you would have tried it.
Just to see what happens. Well, hopefully we've given you enough to sort of think about with that. And thanks, Barnsey Boy, for the question. To kind of sort through some of those things about living together. So now what we're going to do, gentlemen, is kind of a get to know you sort of thing. So I'm going to draw a question, and we're going to see what it is, and then quickly answer this. All right, so the question is, get to know you. What is your confirmation verse and why? So what is your confirmation verse and why? I can start.
Okay.
I know mine because I actually chose mine later. I was given a confirmation verse when I was confirmed. But when I was confirmed, I got to be honest, it really didn't mean a whole lot to me, and wasn't a thing. It wasn't until later in high school that I was like, hey, this is important. And so I chose another one. It was actually on my bracelet here, and it's John 16:33, and I wear this bracelet a lot. It means a lot to me. So just because it's a reminder of a lot of things, but it's primarily a reminder of, that you're going to have trouble in the world, right? It says, in this world you will have trouble or tribulation, but be brave because I've overcome the world. That's Jesus saying that. And so I found that to be a great comfort to me in a lot of stuff. It's an admittance that it's not going to be perfect. You're going to have a lot of trouble, but Christ is there in the midst of that trouble.
What was your confirmation verse that you rejected?
I don't even remember. It was such not a thing for me. Like it was.
I have a theory about confirmation verses, but I'd like to find out what yours was.
I don't know. I'm sure I probably could. It's probably on a record somewhere.
Disciples of all men. He's like,
all the time. Actually, I think it was the
no.
passage where Elisha says to maul the 42 youths with
she-bears.
I should pick that one. I remember in college, I actually...
But you're not bald. So.
No! Some friends of mine made a list of the top 10 worst confirmation verses that you could choose, and it was just horrible stuff that you were like, I should never use that. Anyway.
Mine is John 14:27. Jesus telling the disciples, "Peace I leave you. I do not give as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid."
Nice.
I love that verse, and I did not pick it. My pastor, who just retired this past year, he selected it for me, and as he selected all the kids. And my theory is that for some reason, I honestly think that sometimes maybe you may not jive with it at that time, but I think your confirmation verse really kind of shapes who you are. Where your confirmation, whether you know it or not, that maybe the Holy Spirit's at work, and that when the pastor selects this for you at that time, and maybe for the rest of your life, because for me, that verse has had vast meaning, and I'm live my life almost not necessarily according to that verse, and I didn't set out to say, I have to live my life to this verse. Right. But when I reflect back about my ministry and who I am and how I approach ministry, it actually, I was going, and then I look at my confirmation verse, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I see these two things, peace.
Sure.
I very much about peace and leaving peace and being peaceful to others, and, not giving as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and I think, okay, how can I untrouble my heart and not be afraid of these things?
Sure.
And it keeps on driving me back to Christ. Sure. In that regard,
cool.
So I have that's my theory. It's probably Maybe write
I don't
Maybe
know
I'll
that I
write a
disagree.
dissertation on it.
A paper, and we'll release it because you will
Yes.
all want to read
Yes,
it.
yes, I'm sure.
But no, that's
Yeah.
that's actually not a big.
That's why I want to know what yours is.
Yeah,
you know?
I honestly have no idea.
You'll have to
I'm
look
sure
it
I
up.
could probably look it up because when I chose this one, it was like this one. I thought like fit with me,
Yeah.
and you know, for whatever reason, this has always sort of resonated with me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Drew.
Romans 1:16, I'm not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for the salvation of all who believe. And I lean on it. I have artwork in my office for it. I have artwork in my home on that verse. And I think one thing I like about it too is that in some ways being a Christian in our world can be scary, and we almost feel like we can be shamed because of it. But
Sure.
I like knowing that the scriptures have gone ahead of me and have reminded me before I was even born that don't be ashamed of the gospel, and
Right,
especially because it is the power of God. And so it was just randomly chosen for me, but because Ryan's theory is absolutely true,
Because
I've
we
leaned on it
totally
my whole
bought it.
life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we'd never heard it before until just then,
Yeah.
and now we're totally into it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna pretend like we thought that all along, and we hope you do too. No, so there you go. So that's a little bit of a get to know us. So then, like I said, we'll do this every episode. We'll have one question we'll pick out of the bowl, and hopefully you'll learn more about who we are and why we're doing what we're doing. So
Maybe they should let us know what their confirmation verse is.
ooh, yeah, let us. That's a great thing.
And see if my theory holds true.
Ooh, wow. Social experiment.
Yes.
So on the fly social experiment. So yeah, definitely tweet out, Instagram, Facebook, hashtag ForthrighTV, put down your confirmation verse and sort of why that is your confirmation verse, and we'll see if Ryan's theory holds up. And this will be more fodder for his dissertation that he's going to write.
Yeah, I
So-
should probably get in a program.
Maybe we'll work on that. We'll let you know.
Yeah.
But again, thanks for watching, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with another question submitted by you. So thanks for watching again. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, hashtag ForthrighTV @ForthrighTV. Make sure you get connected to us. Follow, share, like, do all those things, and we will see you next time.